Hello, everyone. Ooh, don't fall, babe. Don't fall. Because we have a lot to talk about especially these two roommates. Very suspicious. Dylan is changing her story yet again. Why are we still giving these two roommates the benefit of the doubt? I don't know why, but you know what? Every time a court document is released, it just opens up a whole other can of worms. Now we have way more questions for Dylan. Now we have way more questions in general. So we're gonna go back to the beginning, right? Because first, what was the story with Dylan and with Bethany? Oh, they were sleeping. They didn't hear anything, okay? Change the story. Let's change the story. Then we hear, oh, they were frozen in shock. Oh my God, those poor two girls. They must have been so afraid, frozen in shock, couldn't move, couldn't think. They were just, frozen. Then we learned these two actually thawed out, basically, and we found out that they were not frozen in shock at all. Dylan changing her story again. Every time something is put out there, a document is released and is exposing Bethany and Dylan, story changes again. Now we know they were not frozen in shock. What were they doing? Let me refresh your memory. They were texting each other. They were calling other people. They were on Instagram. They were on Yik Yak. They were talking to people on the phone. They were editing pictures. They were online basically the whole time, right? And before I forget, okay, all of this is alleged, all of it, it's my opinion, guys, obviously, my theories, right? But in my opinion, guys, it's really fucking weird how Dylan continues to change her story. Now she's saying that she saw Xana on the floor. And I'm like, okay, now I have even more questions for you, because you saw Xana, but you didn't see any red fluid. I beg your pardon. Did you see Ethan? Because Ethan is way larger than Xana. You didn't see Ethan? How does that make sense? And again, if we go back in time, back to the beginning of this case, guys, I made a video talking about the footprint. Do you remember the footprint that everybody claimed it probably belonged to Brian Cobberger? The one footprint that we all joked, was it a ghost who has 1 foot or something? And then it all vanished? What did I say? Do you guys remember what I said about that footprint? I said, if there's only 1 footprint, then that means something else was cleaned up, right? Because you're not gonna have just one latent footprint that was brought up with the amino stain, right? They use the amino stain to show red fluid. But now we know, 2.5 years later, that it's probably very likely that my theory from 2.5 years ago was right. It's probably, in my opinion, very accurate, that footprint probably belongs to Dylan Mortensen, because we know she's tall, she's got big ass feet to match, right? She's got big ass feet to match. And what was she doing up there? What was she doing up there? Now, I also have some other questions, because we've all now know that, they called the 911 call. Back in the day, they were telling us, they meaning Moscow Police Department, meaning Chief Fry, was telling us, oh, it wasn't the roommates that called 911. It was somebody else. It was somebody else that used their phone and called. But no, they called 911, right? And why did they call 911 if they hadn't yet entered the bedroom? Do you know what I mean? Because we hear Hunter in that 911 call that he's supposedly opening the bedroom. So why are you calling if you guys haven't even entered the bedroom yet, supposedly? Unless, of course, they actually had maybe earlier entered the bedroom. Did they? Dylan, was that your footprint? Was that your footprint? Did you actually see the bodies before? Were you waiting for whatever reason to call 911? I don't know about you guys. Let me know in the chat. You might disagree. But if I saw somebody lying on the floor just gonna be like, I mean, I guess they'll figure it out. Who says that? That's basically what Dylan is telling us, that she saw Xana lying on the floor and just said, fuck it, basically. Why is the media still pretending that these two grown-ass women are not or should not be held accountable for what they did, which is what? They didn't call 911, which also makes us wonder if when Dylan saw Xana on the floor, was the intruder still in the house? Because if the intruder was still in the house and she waited to call 911, maybe something could have been further avoided. Yeah, I'm going to see a masked man in the house and a roommate on the floor, and I'm just going to keep it moving, right? Let's just keep it moving. If you thought she was passed out on the floor, wouldn't you at least help her off the floor? Like, maybe put her on her bed, or maybe try to wake her up and make her more comfortable, maybe take off her shoes or whatever, or just make her more comfortable, right? I don't understand why more of the parents are not angry that one of the roommates could have saved them all if they really had wanted to, in my opinion. And what did I say in the beginning as well? I said that when somebody's story continues to change time and time again, guys, you don't need to have a psychology master's degree 4.0 to know this, okay? I paid $100,000 for my degree, so you don't have to. If somebody's story is constantly changing, it is because what? It is because they are fucking lying to your face. You're welcome, honey. Just saved you $100,000 and a lot of hard work, okay? Because liars always have to remember the lies that they're telling, right? But they can't. They can't remember their lies. This is basic psychology 101 of lying. Thank you, guys. I see $5 super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Why is she lying? You wouldn't lie about something like this unless you were directly involved, in my opinion. And I mentioned this from the beginning when we started catching a lot of discrepancies in Dylan's stories. Red flags up in here. Back from 2 years ago. You're welcome. And there's been so much change, right, in the story. I first remember hearing when Ethan was supposedly found in the hallway. And then they were saying that the room that Dylan Morrison was in was an extra room, that it wasn't her actual room. And I'm like, look, if Dylan and Bethany would have called for help way sooner, they could have at least saved somebody. Unless, of course, you were in on it. How many times are they going to change their stories? This is ridiculous. These are two grown-ass women that continue to change their stories, okay? And it's a damn shame because those 4 beautiful souls that are no longer with us, sometimes they're here with us. Sometimes you see orbs. Sometimes you see black shadows. Guess what? Guess who that is? Yeah, they're not resting in peace. Why? Because they want justice. Okay? Only God knows what type of suffering those poor 4 young, beautiful people went through that horrible night. And all we want for them is for them to rest in peace. And what else do we want? We want justice for Mr. Cobberger. Because if he was not involved in this whatsoever, and we have him sitting in there wasting away in a fucking cell for 2.5 years, how is that fair? How is that fair to him? How is it fair for him to have to be sitting there just because he was accused when we have all of these other sources of unknown male DNA all over the crime scene? None of it was tested. Now we found out recently that the mattresses were not tested either. The fucking crime scene was not tested. The bed frames were not tested. How is that fair to anybody? And to top it off, I find it very, very strange that Dylan claims to have seen Xana, but where was Ethan? How can you miss Ethan? Again, Ethan is a pretty big guy. You don't just not see Ethan. It's very weird. It's very, very weird. It's giving me chills, really. I'm trying to pull up the chat here, guys. Please bear with me. Why is she or he, however Dylan identifies? And for those of you who all get all bent out of shape, it doesn't matter how Dylan identifies. Yes, it does. Because there were 2 sources of unknown male DNA. So you see how it would change? Because if she's a biological male, she could technically match one of those male DNAs that was found at the crime scene. That's why it matters, okay? Stop making this some political bullshit that it's not. This is science, bitch. This is science. It's making Dylan look really shady. It's making Dylan look bad. Who's in the chat? Who's in the chat? Hello, Hoppers. Oh my God. Hoppers, you're back. Hi. Hello, Petra. Thank you, Petra. Hi, Michael. Hit the like. On my way in. Yeah, that's right. Will Dangles says, Nika, love your energy and ride on with all the BS in this, Kate. What do they even mean by the face frozen shock phase? Like, they took that out of context and they didn't really say, right? But like, they were using it as an excuse, like, well, they couldn't react. But if you're frozen in shock, you're not reacting. Like, your entire being has shut down, right? When you're experiencing something traumatic, we sometimes see that with like children or people who have just been in traumatic situations in general. But these 2, okay, they can't use the frozen in shock phase anymore because now we have evidence to prove that they were not frozen in shock. They were on their phones, they were calling people, they were editing images, they were on Snapchat, they were on Instagram, they were even on Indeed. So yeah, they can't use that excuse anymore, guys. She touched and left red stuff on the rail. Very likely, very likely. It was Long John Silver. Brooke, hello. There's pictures of her wearing Vans. Let's test the bottom of her shoes. Yes, Brooke, and that's exactly why 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago, I had speculated that latent footprint belonged to Dylan. Because when you look at her, she's fucking tall, meaning she probably wears a size 10 shoe. Like, I work with very tall women at work also, and they wear about that size shoe. So if you're that tall, and I had seen the pictures of her wearing Vans, it seems like she's almost wearing Vans in every image. So it's like, that was my first theory. Just go back and watch that video. I literally said, she's a tall bitch, wears a size 10, and has Vans. Who else would match that footprint? What was she doing up there? What was she doing up there? Remember, she'd also made some calls to her daddy. What did her daddy tell her to do? Do you guys think that this has anything to do with the clean up crew theory from 4chan that I covered a while ago as well? Either way, guys, thank you all for joining today's short videos here. I did make 2, so please make sure to go watch the very first neuro nugget for today, because I think you're going to be very interested. Yes, and on top of that, Bear says Bethany deleted photos. Exactly. This, people love to say, well, Brian Cobberger looks very guilty because he drives in the dark and wears gloves because he's OCD. And it's like, okay, but you're going to make excuses for these 2 roommates that probably heard screams. We know they heard people talking. We know they saw the masked intruder at least 3 times. And on top of that, they're on their phone the entire time. They were not sleeping. They were not frozen in shock. We can't continue to give them the benefit of the doubt. It has to stop, people. Wake up. So please leave your vote in the comment section. Do you think that Dylan is innocent? She knows nothing. Perfect angel? Leave a 1. If you think that Dylan changing her story alone is making her look bad, is making her look like a very questionable human being, and on top of that, you didn't even see Ethan, why don't you mention Ethan? Why don't you mention red fluid? If you think that that's weird that Dylan is changing her story again, and it may be pointing to her being potentially involved in this case, please leave it too. I already know where this is going. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me. I gotta go. It's almost 3:30. I gotta go to my other job. Oh my God. You died. Come back. I'm sorry, you fell. This is what I was using to hold you up. Literally. I look very hot and sweaty because, well, these two roommates really get my blood boiling a lot. Seriously. So, yeah, guys. See you soon.